episode, the continued struggle between Charles and Lucille. And the question that I have after watching this episode is, do we all believe that Charles is going to eventually cheat on Lucille? Now, I would like to go first in this scenario. Uh, yes, I see it coming from a mile away. Obviously, we saw that he did the work for, he was singing in the choir, got very close with the woman that he was singing with. Um, and then he also decided to opt to do work for her later in this episode at her house. Now she was going to pay him. And 1 minute he was hesitant. Well, let me stop right there. She wanted to dance with him. He started dancing with her. She opted to pay him. He took the money. He was hesitant to do so. But, the whole thing with the struggle between him and Lucille is that it's always about money. You need to have money. You have to pay for this. You have to pay for that. So I kind of feel like it's going to get to a point where, yes, he took the money, but he definitely could have did a lot more. And I think that eventually he is going to cheat on her because he's not getting this type of love at home. So it kind of feels like it's headed in that direction from what I can see. And then I also find it funny how Pastor Swift, aka Snoop Dogg, now he is, getting involved as a counselor. He had the whole speech to her about you need to work on being submissive to your husband, so on and so forth. But then he talks to Charles, and Charles is like, "Oh, hey, I never put my hands on anybody of the cloth, but you keep talking to me this way, and I will do that." And I will tell you this: I would love to see Snoop Dogg get into it with Charles because, hey, he has a wrestling background, right? He was in WWE. He made appearances in WWE, AEW. So I want to see Snoop Dogg try to fight, so I can see him get whooped by Charles. So hopefully that does happen. But I just found that to be quite entertaining portion of the episode because it's a lot of tension. Again, it's consistent. We saw it from the first episode this season, the continued downfall of this marriage. So my answer would be yes. I do feel he is going to eventually cheat on Lucille. I see it coming from a mile away. But what do you think, Dana?
Remember, Sasha Banks can teach him some moves. That's a cousin.
Oh yeah.
So that's also there. Here's the thing for me. I like drama and slightly chaos, and they seem to be a couple who's growing apart. She seems to be smothering his soul. She smothered the kids, she's smothering him, and I think she's smothering herself. We saw that she is trying. Remember when she bought the negligee? I think you would call it. That's the proper terminology, the negligee. But she again is just a turnoff in terms of how she speaks to him, how it seems how she just carries this whole marriage. There is the incident with the magazines and like, oh my God, it was a great sin that he was looking at the dirty pictures, So I just feel that she's so controlling that she is driving him away. And it's not necessarily, I don't view it as sexual. I view it as more of like, I'm a man, I want to feel like I'm important, that I matter. And she is so domineering of that, that it takes away his manhood. Is this marriage still salvageable? Yes, it could still be salvageable. But at this moment in time, I think we're going to start seeing that break and that fracture of the family. And I really like to say that it coincides alongside with, remember how the show opened with the fires and the city is just burning down and, everything is falling apart? To me, that's also a metaphor for their marriage. Everything is just falling apart right now. And if you look at how she behaves, remember with the kids and get out of my house. And I understand you don't want your kids to be drug dealers. You want them to make an honest living and you want them to be successful and not, do drugs and be a stereotype. I understand that. Or it's like, or get out of my house. Sometimes that tactic does not always work. It does not always end up being like, yeah, mom, I really miss home and I really want to come back. And, are you okay? please forgive me. It's not going to always work that way. As we've seen with Meech, we've seen him, he's prospering, even though it's wrong, he's still somewhat prospering, doing what he's doing and finding that sense of freedom. We're getting back with the brother because there is a whole issue with the father that I just want to slightly touch about. And that has to go with the father seems to have a lack of control in his own household. And as a result, he is extra hard on his other son. When you go about with the car business, and remember him just wanting to be like, hey, let's incorporate some new ideas. Here's what I'm thinking. We have to modernize. We can't always do the same things that you've been doing in the 50s. Let's at least reach somewhat of the 80s. Let's at least do 79. Can we hit 1979 at least? So for me, it seems like because he lacks a sense of control in his house, that he is trying to control his son. And I believe that's when the son said, I left one controlling situation from leaving my brother who was controlling him to now being controlled by my father, which for me, we all know how it ends up going, but he's going to drive his son even further away from the home. And then who else does anyone have? When you look at the dynamic of the mother and the father, they've both, in a way, kind of driven their sons out the home, and then they're stuck with each other, but they're trying to control each other, or she's more trying to control him, that it's going to fracture. It's going to fall apart at some point. And so while, unless someone has a group intense family therapy, where we actually understand and recognize everyone's voices and not try to speak down to or say, I'm their parent, I know best, there may not be reconciliation for that. And also the fact that he was doing the flirting in the church with his wife, just mean mugging. That's really disrespectful. But it's also, I felt that he did it as a point of saying, this is what you're driving me to do. Because he wasn't sneaky about it. He was all like, yeah, praise the Lord, and the wife was just, So that is to probably give her some cues. This is, like I said, you're driving me to do this. And look at me being happy. But is he really happy, even though he may be driven to another woman? We don't know. I think it's a temporary response to a much longer situation. It's a temporary high. You can look at it as, here's this nice young woman who's looking at me. She's laughing at me. She's giving me some form of attention. There's chemistry. Just for a moment, I feel seen. And so that's, for me, is all he wants. He wants to walk this world being seen as a man and as a person and as a member, not only just a member of the household, but as head of the household. And he's losing that. And I think he's losing a sense of himself, which may end up driving him into having an affair. So I don't know how this all plan out. But at this moment, I'm sorry, I may be a terrible person. I'm team breakup. You can come back later, but y'all need a break. Y'all stressing me out. I mean, you chastising the man for every single thing that he does. I'm ready to leave the house.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I feel.
I think that was an excellent takeaway, and I think you nailed pretty much everything about what exactly the issue is. The only other point that I was going to add is, like you said, the control, but I also want to add that I'm very glad that they put this whole disconnect between the father and the son in this show, because it's an excellent representation how there are different generations today and how the younger generation, they don't really understand or respect certain things that the older generation has done. And then vice versa, the older generation feels as though, well, this is the way that we do things. They don't really understand how the younger generation operates at all. So I'm very glad they put that in this show, because that is an ongoing discussion that happens today. But yeah, I agree with everything you said. I don't have anything else to add. It is control, and I do feel as though it is best for them to break up. But Charles is definitely going to cheat because I kind of feel like we saw that coming. We see that coming, and the fact that
He needs
Pastor
to.
Swift is now getting involved, aka Snoop Dogg is now trying to do his counseling thing. But again, as they point out, he's on his third marriage, right? So we'll see what happens.
Am
But
I
listen, I want to see that. I want to see that fight between these two because I want to see Snoop Dogg get knocked out. I want to see how they play that off because it feel like it's going to happen. Now that they tease it, I want to see it, but we'll see.
It kind of feels like he's a terrible pastor in a way. I don't know. I don't
Oh
trust
yeah,
him
oh
yet.
he
I still
is.
think
Oh
he's
he
gonna.
is.
It just feels like he's gonna run home with the church money. I don't
Yeah,
trust him yet.
no, he is meant to be a shady pastor, and I know in the black communities, especially, I've run into my fair share of shady pastors as well. So they had to put this in there because it's very realistic.
Oh
But
yeah,
we'll see what happens for sure.
we'll see. But I'm interested to know what's going on with that pastor. And also,
Absolutely.
by the way, going to the pastor, I understand why you would do that because pastors are, considered to be community leaders and they give advice and they're supposed to be that spiritual guide. But also as a man, do you know how disrespectful that is? Like to tell another person your business and to therefore allow them into your home, into your marital problems. So I also, again, understand why he's completely frustrated. Heck, if he decides to leave the church at this point, is he to blame? That's kind of what I wonder. Like, how far can this break go? Will he leave the church?
That's a good question. That's a very good question. Hey, some stuff is definitely about to happen though, so I look forward to seeing where they go from here. Um, yeah, very good job. So let's go now to I think